how do you reassure them if that is the reason for their questioning, that the former president will not return, or that his political movement, which is still very strong, will not once again take power in the United States?
Well, we just have to demonstrate that he will not take power.
Who do you think would be the tougher competitor, Ron DeSantis or former President Trump? And how is that factoring into your decision?
It'll be fun watching them take on each other.
All right, let's bring in. He was having fun.
He was loose yesterday.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Oh, really? He's still got a following? Oh, yeah? Let's bring in right now the White House Deputy Chief of Staff and Assistant to the President, Jen O'Malley. Dylan, Jen, thanks so much for being with us. The President, well, let's just say he seemed loose yesterday. He seemed relaxed. I'm curious, we hear about this call between Kevin McCarthy and the President. Do you have any information you can pass along about what they talked about?
Well, thanks for having me. And I think the president continues to be quite pleased with what he's seeing out there. And as you'd imagine, he is talking to Leader McCarthy. He's talking to Democrats and Republicans, some that won, some that lost yesterday. And I think he's making clear what he's made clear to the American people. He's going to work with anyone to get done the business of the American people.
So Jen, we had James Carville on Wednesday morning, and James said, you know, we're going to be trying to figure this out 30 years from now, exactly all the crazy things that happened last night. He said something like that in my very bad James Carville accent. What have you guys figured out, looking through the numbers, looking through the data? What did happen on Tuesday that caught even the most optimistic Democrats by surprise?
Well, I think you had a great James impersonation there. I got to, as a kid, work with them in Louisiana. So, you know, look, I think that we were certainly optimistic, and we knew that turnout, if people turned out like we saw in 2020, what we would call the Biden coalition, young people, women, communities of color that are responding to actually seeing what can be delivered and the progress that we've made, that we would have a good night. But also, I think we saw that people in places that we'll look at that had early vote and voting by mail and election day vote, that more people were able to participate because the process was easier. And I think that was significant. And that's what the president was speaking to, too, before the election. How do we have patience in looking at the results of what happened, but how do we do more so people in this country continue to know how important their vote and their voice was? And when that happens, I think you see the results that we're seeing and how we continue to be quite optimistic today.
Jen, good morning. If viewers can look down on the bottom of the screen, our projection, though Democrats did better than expected on Tuesday night, is still that the House will go to Republicans. The Senate, it remains to be seen. How does that new dynamic in the House affect what you all do? How does it change your strategy when you look at a Congress, frankly, Republicans who've said we're going to start impeachment hearings on day one? We want to talk about Hunter Biden's laptop and all this stuff that they're going to throw at you. Does it change your calculus about how you proceed now over the next 2 years?
Well, the first thing I would say is I had a couple calls this morning, and I think the House is truly still in play here. And to be here today and to see how close it will be, and that there is still a path when we look at the races that are outstanding, when we look at the votes coming in on the West, there's definitely still a path for Democrats to hold the House. So that's significant. But I think the president has been clear. I think the American people were clear in voting that they want elected leaders who are working together to deliver on behalf of what they are seeing in their lives and the impacts that they are feeling. And I think regardless of what we face moving forward, you're going to continue to see more of the president getting done the business of the American people. I think he's passed over 200 bipartisan bills, delivering on some very significant pieces of legislation that we're going to continue to feel more of the impact of into next year. So I don't think anything changes about that. Head down, doing the work.
And some news just a few minutes ago that inflation, while still high, is at least headed in the right direction. White House Deputy Chief of Staff Jen O'Malley. Dylan, Jen, thanks so much. We appreciate it.